The Aboleth is one of the first monsters that you'll see in the monster manual, but despite how imprinted it is in the D&D canon, I've not seen much love for Aboleths in the fanbase. That's why in today's video, I'm going to kick off a new series of videos where I go through the monster manual and make each monster more menacing and much more memorable. I'm Ellis from Dungeon Bits, and let's give a monster makeover to Aboleths. To truly make this slimy son of a perch more menacing, we're going to go over what an Aboleth is, and how we can change its abilities and what it does to make it more evocative. So to start with, in brief, the Aboleths are great old ones. In fact, they are the great old ones. Much like the Lovecraft mythos from which they draw their inspiration, Aboleths are older than what our mortal notions of what power and what a god is. Also, really funny, at the top of their page there's a quote from a Githzerai scholar who asks whether or not Aboleths predate the gods themselves. And then it's answered in the next line. Okay. But beyond that, Aboleths are incredibly alien. They're highly intelligent aquatic creatures with a number of abilities to dominate their victims. As for their wide history, they were supposedly first created by a being known as this. And once they were spawned into existence by this blood-drenched eldritch being, Aboleths then came from the far realm to form a powerful empire in the depths of our world, where they enslaved mortals and ruled with an iron slimy tendril. But with the gods' arrival, their empire was destroyed, leaving Aboleths with eons worth of grudges, because an Aboleth can perfectly recall every memory it has ever experienced. Quite the lobby of ideas to work with. But I suspect the reason why Aboleths aren't as beloved as Beholders or Mind Flayers is because of a few things. First of all, unlike those other two aberrant weirdos, they're specifically aquatic, which means you can't just drop them anywhere in your game. They are aquatic, but the PCs most likely aren't. So it's very unlikely that they'll cross paths. And also, they don't really have a striking appearance or visceral gimmick. For example, Beholders are floating, many-eyed balls of madness that shoot beams out of their eyes, and Mind Flayers are the familiar visage of people with octopus heads that eat brains. Also, just look at the names. Beholder because it's an eye, Mind Flayers because they eat brains, and Aboleth. Oh, old boy. So, if you're the sort who knows all about the D&D lore and considers it a badge of honour to run the setting as is, then you can go ahead and run Aboleths. But let's see if we can make them more than just a third place aberration, and funnily enough, I propose 3 different routes to make them more interesting. The first direction you can go is keeping with the themes of them being the battered remnants of their fallen empire, and now they only linger as terrifying sages to travel to and barter with. Because despite their fallen empire, one strength that they do still hold, and one that they should absolutely leverage as much as they can, is their wealth of perfectly stored knowledge. Is your big bad evil guy a seemingly invincible undead villain who has risen again? Well, perhaps the Aboleth knows who this undead is, and how to defeat them. And just to drive it home, I would give the Aboleth some extra ability that says, if you just try to use Detect Thoughts or some other manner of magical charm on the Aboleth, then you automatically fail against its enslave ability. Your futile attempts at trying to use simple magic against the superior mind of an Aboleth instantly makes you an unwilling spy or a mind control supporter of the Aboleth you're trying to charm. Because when it comes to asking an Aboleth for knowledge, you can bet the farm that it's not going to give it for free, and the only way you're going to get this knowledge is if you do something highly unsavory for the Aboleth. As to what that will be, is up to you. Maybe you have to trick a hamlet full of people to swim in the waters that it lurks in, or safely take a clutch of its eggs to a body of water to spread its influence. And think about it. Aboleths may be worse to bargain with than devils, because they know your deepest desires upon seeing you and know exactly what to offer you. Before introducing the Aboleth, ask your players about their deepest desires, even if they're dark or hedonistic. Their character, not the player, that might get awkward. In a campaign full of dragons, bugbears, and fairies, Have Aboleths be these sadistic, vile, and alien beings that you're forced to try and reason with. However, by doing this, while you make them more of a presence that you're forced to deal with, it humanizes them quite a bit, in the same way that Xanathar has basically been made into just a weird guy, rather than an incomprehensible sphere of weirdness. So, we tend to link evil to villainous beings, but Aboleths could very easily be assigned that alignment simply because their actions and methods are dispassionately malicious towards all of humanoid kind. Lean more into the cosmic horror side of them. They might look at us as just animals with our smaller and pathetic brains. Due to this, they'd be completely detached from empathy, to the point where enslaving us is just an inbuilt biological ability as natural to them as an eagle is able to fly. So, if we make them have no empathy in the same way that the elder gods in the Lovecraft mythos see humans as just specks of dust, then let's make them have abilities and methods to mimic this. Aboleths can make your skin warp and change, so you can only survive in the waters in which they dwell. But instead of just making you translucent, what if it was grosser? What if your Aboleth could make the person roll a d4, or undergo a more fishy transformation? Instead of just translucent skin, with a touch from its tendril, your legs begin to painfully snap and coil like a helix until you have a fleshy mermaid-like tail that forces you to be prone on land. Or maybe the skin on your hands flakes off, leaving a slimy membrane until your hands are like fins, making it impossible to wield things. Or your neck splits open in a torrent of blood, giving you gills so you can't breathe on land. Or your face begins to melt and bulge into a fishy head that can't speak. Seaweed, sludge, grime, barnacles, bodily fluids, bulging eyes, fingernails and hair falling off, gurgling organs drowned in seawater make their influence truly disgusting. Maybe, if the target gets a result of 5 or lower on this save, its body goes translucent and jelly-like as all your bones melt, making you into a helpless blobby jellyfish on land where it's painful to drag your body across sand, gravel and rocks. And to go weirder, instead of just wearing off when the Aboleth dies or after a minute, you could make it so the person only reverts back after they eat some of the Aboleth's brain, leading to odd side effects. What side effects? That's up to you to decide. I say that because Aboleths have a super brain that has long been linked to psionics, so if you want to create adventures around Aboleths, have you read The Shadow over Innsmouth? The fishing has dried up, leaving the town penniless and starving. But then, their dwarfish leader feels a voice from the tide. I can offer you and your people much. No more will you beg the sea and the uncaring gods to fill your nets. Simply swim out to me and taste of my nectar. Have the Aboleth bargain with a fishing town or an underdark settlement. Have them be secretly dominated by the Aboleth when the players meet them. Or, maybe even creepier, they are completely devoted to it, because if they help the Aboleth, then they will be immortal and made suited to thrive as nobles in their new empire. A cult based around consuming the slime of an Aboleth and force-feeding it to visitors to dominate their minds could be a perfect low-level or mid-level adventure. Have the players encounter many weird things and people, but never just say, I worship an Aboleth. Never just drop an Aboleth into the world like it's no big deal. The players help the quaint little town to scare off beasts that are attacking their lumberjacks so they can improve the taverns and housing. But they are forbidden from venturing out into the bay. As time goes on, the players eventually come across a man with a big collar hiding odd cuts on his neck. There is a fog that rolls in and the players hear wet footprints at night. Have these people be coy about them having a master at all, and then have them call their master something like the Dwelling Benefactor or the speaker from the tides. Have the players encounter the effects of their presence first, with the people and the area within its domain twisted into horrific vessels, and then describe its eventual appearance in all its grotesque and domineering presence. What I propose to you is that since Aboleths don't have a gimmick like eating brains, let's make Aboleths the pure manifestations of slimy and crawling domination and conquest. The Aboleth is so impressively minded that its brain can passively change your body and the world around you into how it needs you to be. More perfect for its realm. I would make it a creature whose lair keeps on expanding, as it creates problems and proposes grim solutions to those affected, as thin tendrils creep further inland to drain the memories from sleeping people, as it slowly corrupts those around it into an army of walking body horror. And now we arrive at the third avenue, which, to be fair, encompasses a lot of what we talked about into one. Don't just have Aboleths feature in random encounters or one-off adventures. Instead, make them because Aboleths don't get the limelight that the other guys get. I think this can actually work in your favour, as you make them your BBAG. It adds a level of mystery that vampires, liches and mind flayers have lost at this point. The Aboleth BBAG is gonna need some help since their stat block is CR 10, so my tip would be using something like a Kraken instead. Make its attacks have farther range, and have the Aboleth be colossal, like a Leviathan from Subnautica. In order to keep it as an Aboleth, give it immunities that seem relevant, like Psychic, Charmed, and maybe even Stunned, as their mind pushes them through. Also, if you look at an Aboleth stat block, you'll see that all of their DCs are DC 14. And this is so that your players don't go into an encounter and end it by being enslaved rather than going out in a blaze of glory. For our BBAG Aboleth, I wouldn't just give it the same abilities but just bump the DCs up a bit. Instead, I would make its tentacle attack have a fairly high DC and save to resist transforming into the fishy form I described before, and instead of enslaving a target, it can temporarily dominate them and make the PCs attack each other, both of which can be reverted with spells that you'll likely see at this level. Also, you could turn its probing telepathy into this idea that the Aboleth is constantly in your mind, and is able to passively warp your perception of reality as it uses its reaction to make the target of your attack be an ally instead. Or, it can avoid an attack or succeed a save, as it knows what you want to do before your body can even act upon it. Also, their Psychic Drain ability is really fitting, but maybe it would be cool to have an attack that can target anyone, because Psychic Drain can only affect a charmed creature, and when you drain them with this ability, they also lose their proficiency bonus, as you temporarily turn off the memory on how to use this sword, or how to cast a spell, for the day. Also, I think big bads should be able to break the rules, so this thing is so powerful that its psychic abilities from its big beefy brain can bypass immunities to things like charm, or things being put to sleep. The elf that can be resistant to charm and can't be magically put to sleep doesn't say anything about psionics. I have a very clear idea in my head of at least 3 kinds of Aboleths, with one being a super Aboleth, with minions at its disposal that it can control on the battlefield, one being a flesh scaper, capable of twisting things around them more, and one being a more brutish version of an Aboleth, which might go against that idea of being smart, but, you know, let me know if you'd like to see those stat blocks. But what about the campaign itself? It's the BBAG after all. Well, an Aboleth's motive is to rebuild its empire, so it's going to do so with methods of domination that I mentioned before, building an army and changing the world to suit it. A powerful, savage, assembled group, known as the New Imperials, is one of the biggest, most organised forces of bandits that anyone has ever seen. Maybe it starts with them completely corrupting the coastal region in a flash as a bunch of secretly controlled cultists unleash an eldritch disaster while you're only level 1. Then they raid, they kill, they steal, they dominate, until the players eventually discover why humans, lizard folk and orcs are all working together. They have been offered exactly what they want in return for servitude from an unseen emperor. Aboleths have lair effects where they can create illusions in places nearby their lair. So if this BBAG is constantly expanding its lair, it has full control over the minds of those nearby. They can turn kingdoms against each other by faking kidnappings, with their followers being disguised as the other kingdom's assassins, aided by their illusions. This can be the Aboleth being directly involved, or it just told its warlock followers to expand its domains by any means necessary, and has an uncaring and eldritch view on the whole matter. If you are a devil DM and you really want to mess with your players, have the Aboleth bend their minds so they perceive normal folk or allies as enemies. Think of how the Joker messed with Superman in Injustice. This massive eldritch being has been lurking for eons in waking dreams, planning and scheming and waiting just the right time to strike. And weirdest of all, no one knows about it, not even other Aboleths. But why? Well, eons ago, our Aboleth used its incredible brain to wipe everyone's mind, even the gods themselves, as to who it is, what it has done, and what it truly wants. So, the question falls upon you, DM. Does this Aboleth want to rebuild the Aboleth Empire, as we expect, or does it want something somehow even more horrifying that it made everyone forget? Also, side note, you know how I said the reason why Aboleths aren't as loved is because, well, since they're waterbound, you can't really just come across one? Well, our Leviathan-sized Aboleth villain uses this to their advantage. It lies at the bottom of the inky abyss, forcing the players to fight through its ever-expanding slimy domain before having to venture down, where they are completely out of their depth. Hey-oh! Thank you for watching. I'm Ellis, and click the video on screen to see how to make everything more interesting in your TTRPGs. I love you all, and I'll see you next Saturday.